Welcome to Main Street members and non-members. We're honored this morning to have Tom Fox talk about the Blue Highway, well-known ecologist. He'll be introduced by Roberta. I just wanted to mention our future programs. HAZAC is a group of King Street members over the age of 60. But without further ado, Roberta, please.
Hi. Good morning, everyone. It's my real pleasure to introduce Tom Fox to you. Tom Fox has been very instrumental in revitalizing the city over the last few decades. He first started by going into neglect and formed the Green Guerrillas to create urban gardens, and then neighborhood open space to protect those urban gardens. He directed his attention to the waterfront, and amongst other things, but I think the biggest thing that most of us think about when they think about Tom Fox is he started the New York water taxi with Doug Durst, and it again created the imagination that the waterfront was a place worth visiting, and real estate followed. Before that, before he even did the water taxi, he was got engaged in the Westway issue to create Hudson River Park. He formed the advisory board and led it for many years, guiding Hudson River Park development. Then went on to Brooklyn Bridge Park development. It had been an idea in people's heads for a long time, but he helped create, both make it happen and guide it, that it would happen in the best way. A few other little tidbits that I want you, he doesn't only form a ferry system, he was very active in the International Ferry Trade Association, Interferry, and he's on the board of the Worldwide Ferry Safety Association. He's a family man. He lives in Breezy Point for many years as sort of easy rider on motorcycles across the country and even in different parts of the world. As I'm speaking, I'm leaving out Water Taxi Beach and a whole host of things that he's done, but he's kind of an amazing guy, and I'm happy to know him.
Thank you. Don't believe the hype. Pleasure to be here to ask the City Club of New York, and I'm on the executive committee of the City Club of New York as well, to help the community envision an all-maritime plan, because the community was not happy with what was happening with the Economic Development Corporation in the city. So our job, my job, and now your job. My job is as a catalyst, and now you're the first people to see this presentation. The plan was finished last night. I was up at 5:30 this morning putting this thing together, so please excuse any hiccups, burps, or missing sequences. And this is a summary of what is in a 18-page draft copy, which is PDF available, and I will send to Roberta later on today, and she can distribute it to whomever she'd like to. It's a draft because we've been dealing with a whole bunch of folks in the neighborhood, and why don't I shut up and start this, because I'll just keep on talking. So here we are, and here this is. What's happened on the waterfront? In the 1950s, the Port Authority purchased Piers 1 through 12, that's the Brooklyn Bridge to Walcott Street, from the New York Dock Company for $35 million, which was probably a lot of money in those days. And they redid the entire piers. All of the piers, the piers in Brooklyn Bridge Park, but at the same time, containerization was coming into the city, and they built container ports. Whoops, other way. On the opposite side of the river in New Jersey at Newark and Elizabeth. These are the container ports at Newark and Elizabeth. Why there? Because there's proximity to the New Jersey Turnpike, to Newark Airport, and to Conrail Railroad. So it made a better distribution space for the entire nation. However, Maritime, which was a blood of the city, left and moved to New Jersey. Now, when I was involved in the beginning of the Hudson River Park, I was a founding co-chair of the coalition that made a lot of noise, and eventually, 15 years after we started, the Brooklyn Bridge Park was created. The Port Authority owned those piers, and they were redundant. There was Strober's Lumber and a couple of other land uses down there. The port donated the land to the city and state for the construction of the park, along with $85 million. That's what Brooklyn Bridge Park looked like at various points during its construction. I like riding in helicopters. I spent some time in Vietnam when I was a kid, so I think it's always fun to shoot with cameras rather than other things. After the Brooklyn Bridge Park, flipping Roberta's sequence around, Governor Cuomo decided he would rather have people like me on the inside pissing out than on the outside pissing in, said the head of the Urban Development Corporation. So they foolishly made me the president of the new Hudson River Park Conservancy to plan a new park on the west side after we defeated Westway. So this park runs 4.5 miles to 59th Street, and it is a maritime park. Look at the bottom, there's boats. All the way up, there's boats, boats, boats. The thing about a park on the water is you should use the water. The water here is 70% of the park. So we have 4 kayak houses, we have 2 sailing schools, we have boat building programs, we have passenger ship terminals, cruise terminal, sightseeing terminals, ferry terminals, 2 marinas, 3 sailing moorings, and new waterfront access to the river over the last 25 years that this has been under construction. It's still about 3 years away from completion, 4 years away from completion, but it's a work in progress, like everything else in New York. Then I did the water taxi. I realized that you can't get people around, that you can build parks on the waterfront all you want, but you can't get from here to there. And the only ferries that were running were bringing the slaves back and forth to the salt mine from New Jersey. And what I decided was to design a small ferry company that would connect the park's cultural attractions and neighborhoods together. It was a good idea, and EDC ripped it off and created the New York City Ferry and drove us out of business. So much for private investment competing with public funding. Oh, and by the way, you're subsidizing every ferry ride to the tune of $6.85 every time they get on the boat today. Come out of our pockets. This is the property in question, BMT, and you can see its proximity to Brooklyn Bridge Park on the right. The pier, it goes from the end of this image out, and you can see its proximity to Governor's Island. Look at the traffic that runs through what's called Buttermilk Channel. It's a major transportation route for ferry services because going around it puts you out into the harbor and it takes time, and time on a boat is money. So, what's the current situation? In 2024, the city and state got together and decided to transfer BMT. They wanted, real estate developers have wanted control of BMT for 20, 30, 40 years. Views of the Statue of Liberty, Governor's Island, gorgeous. So the city and state made a deal and they swapped, believe it or not, 187-acre, completely completed, city-owned, state-of-the-art container facility in Staten Island called Howland Hook with 6 post-Panamax cranes, 30 foot of depth for post-Panamax ships coming in, rail access to the nation, road access to the nation, whole rail line coming in. They traded that for 122 acres at BMT with no functional cranes, no rail access, limited highway access with a PQE coming down, and about $500 million in deferred maintenance. It turns out that the Port Authority actually had $84 million in their budget in 2022 to help restore the piers, but they decided not to spend it. And for some reason, the city didn't claw it back when they did the transfer either. They created a 28-member hand-picked task force. They called it community participation, but picked individuals that they said represented various elements of the community, because everything was fast tracks. They started in September 2024. They wanted to end by 2025. Not a long period of time to plan 122 acres of the city. But they thought it was impossible. They proposed creating a big container port and filling in the areas between piers 7, 8, 9A, and 9B to create another space for large container ships come in to Brooklyn. And they called this part of a Blue Highway plan. I don't know how. But the problem is that filling in those areas will require permitting that will probably never be gotten. You don't cover over 11 acres of water in New York City easily. So, and the other thing is they failed to address resiliency measures, not only for the site, but for the local community. And the local community is a transportation desert. It's got no mass transit. They didn't look at essential services for about 18,000 residents, because they're going to put in 6,600 residents in 40-story high-rise towers. Now, and they're going to be 40% affordable, but the 40% affordable is not going to be on the top with the views. You can be sure, because that's the way they're looking to finance the rest of it. The problem was the lack of participation and real public participation and transparency. Nothing was available to anyone to see at any time. Actually, Victoria has filed several Freedom of Information requests which have still not been answered. But that's okay, they're just our government, they work for us. They use our money, but they shouldn't answer our questions. Understood. So they had asked us to come in to look at a maritime alternative. Is there a maritime alternative? Could you do something on the water? I was in the Navy in Vietnam, and I've been on the water for 50, 60 years. And I spent 40 years working on parks here on the waterfront in New York. So this is a totally volunteer effort. The City Club of New York is all volunteers. We formed in 1893, and we're still around. I don't look it, but the group is about 60 or 70 SEPTA and octogenarians who've been around the block, former court councils and former transportation commissioners and former people who know how the game is played, such as myself. So we try to do a plan for the waterfront. I just told you that. You see the dangling but so we think it could be, modern maritime port could be implemented more quickly, more cheaply, and can be done as of right. EDC is saying we're going to use a state general project plan to go around land use regulations and review, because we know we couldn't pass it, to rezone half of Brooklyn Marine Terminal. This is a critical maritime facility strategically located in the harbor, and you can see what EDC has done to Williamsburg, Greenpoint, Long Island City. You see any working waterfront there? No. No, it's a visual amenity that people can look at. It's not really something that's usable, and we want something that's functional. There's enough high-rise housing with promenades in front of them looking at the waterfront. So an economically multi-use maritime port of the future will preserve this asset, grow the maritime industry, enhance economic and environmental justice, minimize public financing, leverage private investment, and ensure the creation of the Blue Highway. Ensure the creation of the Blue Highway and strengthen the city's emergency preparedness. Last item, very critical, not in EDC's plan at all. The hub for the Blue Highway, that's why. You can read it. So we're looking at 2 phases for a Blue Highway. They've been talking about the Blue Highway for 20 years. The last 2 years, they've actually done something. They've held demonstrations, moving cargo. Most recently, they brought about 8 boxes of fish from Hunts Point down to Fulton Ferry Landing, and then drove it 2 blocks on a little bicycle. That's not exactly what I would call, and they hand carried it on and off the boat. That's not what I would call demonstration of moving produce from Hunts Point. And the incredible thing they want to do in Brooklyn Marine Terminal, a lot of produce comes into Brooklyn Marine Terminal. So their suggestion is we barge it to the South Bronx at Hunts Point, and then we put it in refrigerated warehouses there, and then we distribute it from the Bronx. Why are we spending all that time when we could put cold storage at Brooklyn Marine Terminal and wipe all of that out and deliver from here and keep the jobs here in this neighborhood? So phase 1 would be, EDC and DOT seem to be competing against each other, although they say they're working together. Because EDC wants to build a new docking facility at the heliport for package delivery, but there's no room in the parking lot, so everything will have to go on a barge. It'll cost a couple of $1 million to build the barge and install it. And it'll be there temporarily because they have a resiliency plan for Lower Manhattan that'll wipe it out. 3 blocks away, DOT has Pier 11, the ferry terminal, which can function today, will cost nothing. Why is EDC planning another facility 3 blocks away? The right hand either doesn't know what the left hand is doing or would rather do it better than the left hand because they know better. So we believe there's a certain competition that's not
Which EDC
working.
is that? Is that the state or the city?
City, no, the city, ESD,
Okay.
Empire State Development is the state entity that they use to usurp
Yeah.
local land use. Phase 2 would be building new docks at locations that are, that have road access. Brooklyn Army Terminal, Brooklyn Navy Yard, Newtown Creek in Greenpoint, where there's a lot of distribution centers, and Pier 36 in Lower Manhattan on the east side. So it's getting redundant, I'll just move along. Bottom is most important. All decisions regarding the future development of BMT should be making a transparent and inclusive public process involving all stakeholders moving forward. This is just chumming the waters. This is meant to be, hey, you could do this. But it's also meant to be the maritime alternative, because EDC has said their plan will have a maritime alternative. Well, we don't trust them to put together a maritime alternative, so we have. We can't address the infrastructure needs outside. We're only focused on Brooklyn Marine Terminal, not the transportation out, not the resiliency out, not because it just would be, it's beyond our capacity, one, and it's not possible unless there's actually a plan and people say, oh yeah, this makes sense going forward. Then you begin to analyze those other elements. BMT is currently heavily used. There's 70,000 containers that come in a year on Seaboard, which is the major tenant there. And those containers are unloaded upland and processed and then distributed. But they're distributed by truck, which creates a lot of air pollution, congestion problems in the neighborhood, et cetera. There's also nonprofits like Portside, there are small businesses, there's a lot of activity in Brooklyn Marine Terminal right now, and we think it should be maintained, expanded, and enhanced. I'm saying a lot of the things that are on the slide because I just put these together this morning and I don't remember the sequence. But this is our raison d'etre, if you will. The reason why this is unique, it's a significant industrial maritime area within see, I got those words fixed up. Within an industrial business zone. So you don't have to change any zoning to rebuild it as it is. You don't have to do anything other than develop a plan. Now, the river has always been the lifeblood of the city since 1609 when Henry came cruising in here. And Lenape had been using it for millennia prior to that. It is the primary highway of the city. So we want to bring that maritime activity that went to New Jersey in for the last 50 years, beginning in 1966. We want to bring some of that back to New York City. It's both important for jobs, for our long-term well-being in terms of the environmental impacts of trucking in the city, and for emergency preparedness. This is a critical place when things like natural disasters, blackouts, 9/11 happen. This is an emergency egress route. So ferries have shown that the harbor is coming back to life, that it has the ability to move people. I think it's 8 million people a year now moving around on the ferry. And also, the recent demonstrations have shown you can move product and produce and building materials and stuff. So we think that the BMT is critical. And here's my stab. After speaking with 20 mariners, marine engineers, environmental engineers, logistics people, transportation people, community people, elected officials, former elected officials, current and former city employees, all of whom are anonymous because I can take the heat. I got nothing to lose and nobody's got anything on. So I'll take it from the top. I'm going to do this fairly quickly, and my shadow will get in the way, obviously. But Pier 7 would go over to the Brooklyn Bridge Park. Expand Brooklyn Bridge Park, give better access to open space to the local neighborhoods. Except for the southern face of the pier, which is 1,400 linear feet. And wharfage, you can't find a place to dock a boat in New York City. So this will remain part of BMT and be managed by the maritime aspect of things. And it will be for historic vessels, research vessels, educational vessels, and visiting vessels coming through the harbor. We have Sail Forth 250 next year. There's no place to put boats. So, when a sailing ship comes into the harbor, it should be able to dock here, adjacent to a park. At the end, we'd like to see, or we think it would make sense to have a marine supply store and food and beverage. Because you can't buy a map, a chart, a length of line in New York City anymore. Stores that used to exist no longer exist in New York. So we would like to build a dry stack marina. Oh, I'm saying we would like to build. Wrong. There could be a dry stack marina for up to 200 vessels, ranging from wave runners to boats 28, 30 feet long. And they are stacked. They're out of the water, so they don't pollute the water. They're stacked in the building that's about 70 feet high, 3 racks of boats. And they're taken off by a forklift. So a recreational vessel, which you can't find a place to dock here in the city reasonably at all, would come in here. A forklift would pick up the vessel, turn it around, put it into a slot. You don't have to take it out in the winter. It's weatherized. It's not creating a beard, as we call, on the bottom of the hull, which is algae and et cetera. You don't have to coat the hull with anything toxic to keep that from happening. And you're not dumping any fuel or transmission fluid, anything, into the water because it's all out of the water on the land. So there are environmental benefits to dry stack marinas, and they're popular in many, many places. I have a friend who's building one in Cancun as we speak. A person, believe it or not, would be able to call up beforehand, say, I'm going out for the day, I'd like my favorite lunch sandwiches, my favorite, hot chocolate for the kids and a 6-pack of beer for the adults. And I'd like my boat refueled, and I'll pick it up at 10 o'clock. So when you get to your boat, there's a cooler with beverages and food, and this is like reality in the rest of the world, but not here in New York. And that's why the proximity of these two, this complements a park, because it's beverage, it's on the waterfront, it's visual, you're watching boats come in and out of dry stack marinas, It's a recreational transition from a working waterfront to a park. Now, Pier 8, which is, I've been told by, or I heard on a podcast by Andrew Kimball, that VDC could function as it is for another 10 years without significant public investments. So we would, excuse me, I have to wet my whistle. I can't even whistle. We would see that as being outgoing roll-on, roll-off vessels, smaller vessels where you drive, you can even drive a van or a box truck or an electric bicycle into this vehicle, and it would deliver the goods around the city to places like Brooklyn Army Terminal, Brooklyn Navy Yard, 36th Street, Newtown Creek, places that can take larger, a van or something like that. This is all warehouse, about 700,000 square feet of logistics and warehousing facilities. This pier is in very bad shape. It would cost about $200 million to rebuild. In the next 100 years, this is supposed to be 16 feet higher in water.
Is
to
that
protect
are we
from
up to
surge.
Pier 9? I'm sorry.
Excuse me?
Are we up to Pier 9?
No,
or
we're at Pier
still
9A Alpha. There's 2 Pier 9s, 9A and 9B. 9A would be, I call it pier banked. We wouldn't do anything with it. We can't afford to do anything with it now. You don't need it over the short term until the system gets up and running. And you never know what's going to happen in terms of resiliency. If there is a need to elevate the pier, you would build it higher. Or another option that Klaus Jacob from the Darden Laboratory at Columbia, who's on our waterfront committee, has suggested, is that it be a floating pier, like in Exxon Valdez has in Alaska. There are floating piers, so this way you wouldn't have to worry about what height it was. How you deal with the resiliency on land is not my expertise. We have a 7-page paper by Klaus of how you would deal with resiliency in this area, and it begins with flood protection in the Gowanus Canal and runs all the way around to Brooklyn Heights. The current Red Hook resiliency, whatever they're calling it, is totally insufficient to protect this neighborhood in the future, but that's another issue altogether. I have dealt with and spoken to major logistics people. This is in fact possible and doable. Pier 9B, though, these are large fuel barges. The fuel barges wait for fuel ships to come in to unload. And then they drive the fuel up to Albany or the hospitals or out to Kennedy Airport. So they lay up alongside the fuel ships and they are filled there. There are only so many anchorages in Bay Ridge Flats, which is called right outside between here and Bay Ridge. So there are many, many boats that currently lay up waiting for vessels here. That's a source of revenue. We should keep it coming in. You don't need the pier to do that. You just put in piles that'll hold it, breast it up against the piles, and then so you can get revenue short term from there. Aggregate and building materials come into this site, causing a problem with dust and that type of thing. Well, it's critical for the city to have building materials run by water, because trucks, again, one barge can take probably 30 trucks off the roadway. So the aggregate would still come in, but it would be over here at the entrance to the pier, where it's out of the way of everything and blocked from the local neighborhood. 9B would be input, because here's outgoing, here we're gonna go out here, we're gonna go out here, but we have to get stuff in. So the container port at Pier 10 continues to function, and it turns out that many of the logistics companies would rather have 53-foot trailers from the back of trucks on barges come across than containers. Containers is because they're going in open sea, but when they empty the containers, they put them in trucks. You can put those trucks on the barge in New Jersey and bring them straight across. 20,000 containers right now come from New Jersey to Brooklyn Marine Terminal every year. So that's the transshipment across the Hudson of these goods. So you could fit probably 20 53-foot tractor trailers without their trucks, just the trailer. A yard mule, they call them, a yard tractor, goes on, pulls them off, goes on, pulls them off, to feed these warehouses. When they're broken down, they feed these warehouses. These warehouses feed the distribution. This is micro distribution. Small pedal bikes, smaller aluminum boats, can land at existing ferry docks, that type of thing. So it begins to be redundant and gives you multiple ways to move goods to and from this area. We would put windmills in. President doesn't like them. I really don't care. And we would look at Atlantic Basin is a unique phenomenon that was built to protect ships coming in barges coming down the Erie Canal, disgorging their goods to the Great Wall of Brooklyn, which were all the brick buildings that went from Brooklyn Navy Yard and Red Hook. This is a protected basin. This is where boats like Sixborough Marine, they have a dry dock here, and Portside is located right there. This building we would convert into a micro-delivery support and garage and repair for all of these small little vehicles. I came here today along Columbia Street, and I had photographs of 8 of those little Amazon guys. The problem is they're on the bike path. In Manhattan, we won't allow them on the bike path at the Hudson River Park because it's for bicycles, not for containers. So, there are transportation elements that have to be worked out. But again, that's not my job. The neighborhood has very poor electrical connections. There are brownouts, blackouts, consistently. This should be independent. We're talking about putting a microgrid in here and a 75,000 square foot tri-generation facility. Now, what is a tri-generation? You've heard of cogen? Well, tri-gen is where you can use energy for refrigeration as well as for heating and lighting. So we've been dealing with the CUNY Buildings Laboratory, and they are experts at this particular type of activity. This would be a 50,000 square foot cold storage facility. So produce coming in here, stays here, and then it gets distributed from here instead of being barged to the South Bronx and back again. The tri-generation facility would be primarily powered by, see all this solar? Solar. Solar is one of the most efficient and effective and cost-effective means of generating energy. So solar, windmills, and there are high efficiency, 90% efficiency, Mitsubishi 5.5 megawatt power generators that are smaller than this room. So the combination of wind, solar, and natural gas could power this site. More importantly, during a time of, so it makes it independent from the grid, draws less energy from the grid. If you can't get energy to the neighborhood now, why would you put a huge electrified port right next to it, drawing a tremendous amount of energy that doesn't exist? The New York State energy suppliers have said that next year there's a greater chance of blackouts, brownouts, power disruptions, excuse me, because the energy supply to New York City is shrinking, and the energy demand is increasing with the electrification that the city has forced all of the building owners to go from gas to electric for heating. So the issue would be having independence so it can actually function at all times, not drawing on the local power grid to the extent that it would, and having the ability to operate in an emergency. Remember, this is an emergency access place. If you can't operate during an emergency, it's non-functional, as we've seen with traffic and streetlights, and the waterways are the only way to go when the hits the fan. So this creates energy independence. This reduces energy pollution. This can also, Victoria and Resilient Red Hook has done a energy microgrid for Red Hook. And there are critical communications facilities, like during the last blackout. Nobody had phones, nobody had, so this could also provide power to critical, smaller scale, but emergency facilities within the neighborhood, helping the local neighborhood as well. Pier 11, right now, there's already a company called Dutch X, whose vehicles I photographed this morning on the bicycle path of the Brooklyn Greenway, that are operating out of there right now. And EDC, our EDC, built a shipyard here and these racks so they could store their boats to do a home port 2. Well, it was built in 2023. It's empty. They spent $19.5 million to build it. Nothing's happening there. Why? No one knows, because they're not transparent. But they just put out a press release saying they were expanding the ferry service and changing routes, and remember that about 2 weeks ago or so? And in that, they said they did not need additional equipment to do so. And their home port at Brooklyn Navy Yard has 2 travel lifts and docking for all their vessels. Well, they built this 2 years ago and they haven't used it. Why don't we just take it? Because if they're not using it, it could be put to good use. We would create a shipyard that would service the entire fleets of the harbor. People who have aluminum boats now, if they have a problem, if they have to haul their boat out of the water, you gotta go to Connecticut, Tuckahoe, New Jersey, about the middle of New Jersey, up towards Albany, because there are no travel lifts or shipyards in New York Harbor, because they're all moved off the waterfront, with the exception of Cadell Shipyard in Staten Island on the North Shore, but that's primarily for steel. 2 different types of boats, aluminum, these little catamarans that are running around, including Sea Street, and then steel, the larger barges, tugs, that type of thing. So this is critical not only for maritime in the harbor, but for emergency preparedness. Again, if something happens, you want to have the ability to repair ships here and keep them moving. You throw a wheel, you can put a diver in and put a wheel on. But you have a crack in your hull plate, that has to be fixed right away. Or the Coast Guard won't let you sail. Coast Guard sets all regulations for the waterfront. So this is critical for a multiplicity of reasons. These racks could be used for those small aluminum boats that pick up those little bicycles that are right in this building. There's Net Zero, there's 3 or 4 companies that have these smaller electrified bicycle vehicles with a range of, they say, 7 to 10 miles for deliveries. Actually, right now, if you order Sephora, you can have it delivered by bicycle to your home from Pier 11. They're actually running boats every day to 39th Street on the west side of Manhattan, where folks are driving off and delivering Sephora Cosmetics all over Midtown and Upper Manhattan. And then lastly, this is building 195. There's a lot of light industry and fabricators and artisans in this area. And building 195 is huge, and it could be accommodated, it could be modified for that. And all along here, there's an open space, and there were 2 buildings right here who've been very, at 160 Inlay Street, and that has been converted into residence. You know, so having a 1 or 2 story retail and artisans and similar to this creates A, support for those types of industries, B, a potential place where people might come from a passenger ship, I'll talk about that later, and C, another source of power, and this building already exists. And then we get to the passenger ship terminal, well, Brooklyn Cruise Terminal as they call it, which is used by its current occupants about 36 days a year. So, and last year, MSC came in, 2 years in a row, MSC came in with huge 4,000 or 5,000 passenger boats, other than the Cunard and Princess, which are under 3,000 passengers. And with the MSC, you could see the impact on the neighborhood, people coming in and out and in and out, because you have, as a home port, which is where the origin and destination of a cruise, you have to have all the people get off, all the trash taken off, all the supplies brought in, all the new guests brought in one day. So it puts a tremendous pressure on the adjacent neighborhood, and it's not designed for that type of thing. The streets are not designed for that. So EDC, we agree with them on rebuilding the passenger ship terminal, which is a temporary facility that they spent $160 million to build in 2006. It was electrified in 2016 by the Port Authority, which still owns all of this land. Actually, I just read the other day, the Port Authority is starting a new delivery service demonstration. They're going to operate drones from Pier 7 to the Wall Street heliport.
They're testing it
Yep.
now.
Yeah. They sent out a notice to all mariners, watch out for flying things and
They
stuff
sent
like
out a notice on Notify NYC.
Yeah, Notify NYC, that's where I got it. The EDC plan of creating a new ferry terminal creates a lot of public open space at Pier 12. And the parking lot that's right here could be a 2-story high parking lot with a park on the roof. So that this side of BMT becomes a big public open space that matches this side of BMT, which is a big public open space. And then connecting the two is this thing, which is a greenway. I had the good fortune of designing the Brooklyn Queens Greenway in 1985 that runs 40 miles through Brooklyn and Queens, from Coney Island to Long Island Sound. It was in National Geographic in 1986, actually. The beginning of the Greenway movement. Well, this would encapsulate the site in a green sward. And lastly, this is the DOT emergency docking facility. And it's designed and being built next year for Olis class ferries. Those are ferries that carry up to 5,000 passengers and no cars. Again, we brought 100,000 people out of Lower Manhattan after 9/11. We brought 50,000 people after the last blackout by boat. So people have to have a place to go. This is the place they go in New York. The place they go in New Jersey is Liberty State Park. The reason why both of them are is because they're big open spaces and they have access to highways proximal to the area. Okay, so much for walking around. I'm gonna look fat on that video. So what does a greenway around the outside do? Well, it surrounds the area and contains it. It's a buffer between maritime industry and the local neighborhood. Contributes to air quality, stormwater retention, wind reduction, steel economists. I gotta edit, yeah, it was done this morning. Bicycle and pedestrian paths, protects the adjacent, instead of just, neighborhood from storm surges and flooding, creates smaller parks and creates access to public open spaces on either end. What does it look like? This is what it looks like. Pratt Institute had a bunch of interns that did studios. And the stormwater idea definitely came directly from them. This would be an elevated pedestrian and bicycle path, because bicyclists could see over pedestrians' heads, have a beautiful view out on the harbor and the waterfront. Notice how wide this is? This is 23 feet wide, this bicycle path. The pedestrian path, nice, strolling like the promenade. Behind it is a bicycle path, and not a cheap little bicycle path, 8 feet in each direction. Minimize confusion, and such. The back of it becomes a urban forest, which does that noise, air pollution, protection from the local neighborhood from anything that's happening in BMT. And you can see this couple walking up through the woods. ADA accessible paths would connect the tops with local neighborhood streets. And along the way, we would include playgrounds, dog runs, sitting areas, restaurants, pickleball courts. In the strategic areas, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Again, these are just suggestions. Where they go, what they do, what they are, it will be up to this long-term community design process to complete. But it provides not only a buffer, but recreational amenities, bicycle and pedestrian amenities for the neighborhood. The stormwater tanks, the adjacent neighborhood floods. And when they flood, storm surges come out into the harbor. What we're trying to do on the west side is install stormwater holding facilities. So instead of polluting the waterway, you hold the water until the rain event is over, and then you pump it slowly to the sewage treatment plant so that you protect the waterway as well. You notice these little drainage gullies, again, here's the types of cargo vessels, vehicles which would be cruising around within the site. The cargo bike on the right is the Dutch X type. They're small, medium, large types of things. But the drainage gully would have a check valve, so that if there's flooding in local streets, it could run out, but nothing could come back in again. So it's called a check valve to prevent backwashing. Again, this is just ideas for consideration. So as I said before, phase 1, existing ferry landings, phase 2, new ferry landings. Everything is electric leaving this site. And no sites in Manhattan would be allowed for vans or box trucks, only bicycles in Manhattan because of the congestion. You can't see this well because it didn't translate from the book, but here are radii of it. You can actually, bottom line is you can cover from the southern end of Central Park to the Battery next year. The bicycles arriving at Wall Street with an alternative to the Brooklyn Maritime building without EDC having to build a new something or other downtown, and West 37th Street and East 34th Street. The bicycles have a range of 3 miles, so it would cover this entire area and all the way up to the center of Central Park. Similarly, Brooklyn Marine Terminal would cover from Brooklyn Navy Yard to the middle of Sunset Park. And then when you added on the second phase, Brooklyn Army Terminal, Brooklyn Navy Yard, and Newtown Creek, you'd also have the access for you'd be able to cover from Long Island City to Bay Ridge, to basically the Verrazano Bridge by bicycle. And you'd also be able to have electrified vans and box trucks go further out into the borough because the center of Brooklyn doesn't have any waterfront. And you have to get from here to there, if you will. But not on big trucks, on electrified small vans and box trucks. The other positive thing about this site is there's these last mile delivery systems directly proximal to BMT. So not only can you move what's here, but you can move what's here, here, here. They're all on water. but they're all designed for trucks. So that's a conundrum. This is the size of these facilities. They are humongous. So what we have to do is get them to change from trucks to boats. And I'll address that at the end. Lastly, emergency preparedness. Excuse the BCT at the end again. That was this morning's putting together the thing. That's why it's important for emergency preparedness. There's the BQE. Buses can come in. 5,000 people get dumped off a ferry. Trains and buses can be coming in, pick the people up, distribute them back from Bay Ridge to Williamsburg. People gotta go home. 5,000 people at each shot. So figure if we took 100,000 people off Lower Manhattan at 9/11, 50,000 of them came to Brooklyn, 50,000 of them went to Jersey, perhaps. Maybe 80,000 of them came to Brooklyn, 20% of them went to Jersey. So what are you gonna do with 80,000 people landing there in a day? You're gonna get them on buses and get them out of the neighborhood. And that's the plan. I've been on the Harbor Ops Committee and the co-chair of the Passenger Vessel Subcommittee, and we've gone through tabletops post 9/11. Not only do you get people out, but you can get stuff back in. And this is a big area. What do you think the searching was doing for remains in, this is done at Brooklyn South Marine Terminal. Sorry. Most importantly, workforce development. We have a lot of young people. When I did the water taxi, I hired kids from the Red Hook houses who started as deckhands and got sick because they were seasick, and actually became captains and captains on the Staten Island Ferry in 25 years. The river keeper who rides up and down the river, turning in polluters for riverkeeper, is Louis Melendez, who was one of my deckhands, who started from the harbor school. So these jobs in trucking and mechanics and warehousing and maritime are blue-collar, high-paying jobs. And they should be for people that live in this neighborhood who have traditionally walked from home to work, as they did and there's the harbor school right across the bay on Governor's Island. And they have something like 400 students. So every year you're getting 200, you're getting apprentices, you're getting young people to come into the industry. What it's gonna cost, I have no idea what specifics will cost. I know in a ballpark we can do this for less than $1 billion. EDC wants to spend $3.5 billion. And that's not including the housing. That's just for the infrastructure, the landfill, new facility, new power and energy, and we don't have that money. I mean, it's great to throw away money if you got it, but we don't got it. And they just announced a $3.5 billion plan for BMT, in addition to a $3 to $5 billion plan for the Midtown Cruise Terminal. $10 billion. Where are we coming up with it? They're very cavalier with money because they think they can build buildings and cross-subsidize infrastructure. We don't want to build buildings to cross-subsidize infrastructure. We want to use private investment and public investment to build it. Now, what are the benefits? You can read the benefits of keeping Brooklyn Marine Terminal as a viable, vital, state-of-the-art, 21st century port. I discussed some of this as I was running through. Who pays? It's always important. Who pays? You got federal, state, and city grants. The Port Authority now has $405 million, they say, set aside for BMT. That's half of what we need. If you only need $1 billion. it's zoned for industry, so we can get IDA, Industrial Development Authority, bonds, which are critical. They're a financing tool from the city that's not money on the table. And what does the IDA do? There are a whole slew of economic support only for industrial business zones, which is BMT. That's a lot of economic benefit for a company moving into the area. I would like to see those last mile delivery systems converted from land to water. How do you do that? Well, it's a carrot and a stick. Maybe we can have IDA bonding for these industrial developers in an industrial business zone, open up their waterfront. They have riprap. I've been back there and photographed this stuff, and it's not acceptable for boats, but it could be. It could be if it was financed, public-private. If you give them an incentive and they put in their money, you could do it. The other thing is tighten the screws a little bit. Let's make sure, these are incentives. That's the carrot. The stick is change the DOT regulations for traffic in Red Hook. No ICE trucks, not ICE, but internal combustion engines operated at all allowed in Red Hook. Everything must be electrified, and restrict trucking in Red Hook. So you gotta go by water. So we'll give you an incentive to move your stuff to the water, and we're gonna penalize you if you don't take it and you keep on going on the land. And then, who have I talked to? This is it. A lot of people, probably 50 individuals representing different professions, interests in the city. What's happening right now is I've started distributing this draft plan last night to Victoria. She was the first person who got one, because she's the person who has to come in. And it's being, when I get home, I'm going to send it to the other 40 people who have been talking to us all along. I've been sending them information as we go, so it's not going to be a surprise. And I'm asking only for substantive, only comments on significant omissions or inaccuracies. That's it. This is a volunteer effort. I did this all. My wife wants me back. And that will happen January 30th. I promised her it would happen, and by gosh, it will. So it's being sent out to all these people, and there's a Monday close of business deadline for comments. It's confidential. Everybody is going to be confidential because the mariners are concerned. EDC is not forgiving. Think of the Trump administration and James Comey. They have their leases in control, they have their property in control, they have their operating agreements in control, and they keep them on 5-year leases. So everybody's on tenders. The problem is you can't get private investment with a 5-year lease. So we're going to have to change the way things happen here. I wrote an op-ed that was published in the news December 29th, suggesting EDC be taken off the waterfront. They got a maritime contract to operate the waterfront in 1991 by Mayor Dinkins. Carl Weisbrot was the first president. He had come from the Public Development Corporation. Well, they have screwed up our maritime system totally. They did the New York City ferry. Well, they can't find $250 million that they spent on the New York City ferry. They don't know where they spent it. A New York City Controller's report from 2022 said they can't identify where $224 million of the $750 million used to roll out the system came from. Went to. The subsidy for the operations, instead of being $6.60 a person as they said it was going to be, was $10 a person. They ran the boats empty all the other mariners cut back their business, but EDC, not only did they cannibalize my business, but they gave the new contract to a group from California who came in, operated the service under subsidy, operated the boats during the pandemic, empty. The subsidy went to $14 a person. Every time a person got on that boat, you were paying $14. Some of the boats had 2 people in them. Not good management. Oh, that company went bankrupt in 2024, by the way. EDC is still using them because they've come out of bankruptcy, but it doesn't show a good management oversight. The passenger ship terminals in Midtown, they were given 4 piers that used to be mine, ours, Hudson River Park, by 1998, when the legislation was written. Giuliani pulled that property out of the Hudson River Park and gave it to EDC. What's happened since? They built a movie studio on Pier 94, not Maritime. They haven't maintained the piers, and 4 years ago, 92 was condemned. Last week, Pier 90 was condemned. That means we only have 1 passenger ship terminal for all the passenger ships coming into New York. And you know what they're gonna say? Oh, we got Brooklyn. Well, damn, you shouldn't have Brooklyn, because those boats carry 5,000 to 6,000 people. Why would you let them dock here when you couldn't handle MSC? Oh, and by the way, MSC, who came into the harbor in 2022, with a great announcement by Mayor Adams, just announced they're leaving because they were supposed to dock at Pier 90, which the Port Authority never maintained. So, you know, are these the kind of people you want maintaining your maritime assets? Our maritime assets are critical. It's not just visual, it's a critical physical amenity that keeps an industry going. And it's out of sight, out of mind, because you don't see those boats and barges, but they're critical to your food. If Arizona Bridge goes down, we starve. There's no way to get across, and that's 1 crossing. You know, trucks have to come in either Verrazano or the George Washington Bridge. If you could have a blue highway that brings them right here, via barge and such, then if, God forbid, something like that happens, we have a redundant system that can keep us going and fed. And all of Long Island fed, because we're the entry to 110 miles of people. That's it for me. I'm sure you guys have questions. Thank you very much.